Sales Crunch. Learn more, earn more.
If your customer is coming into you and talking in a very visual manner and a visual style of communicating, so they say something like, "I want to see how it works before we sign." You being a kinesthetic, you can say, "Well, let me help you get a good feel for it." Because, like I said, it's all about those neurons. Not the different parts of the brain that are supposed to be firing are firing. And you're literally talking apples and oranges. So if instead you communicate the way that they're used to being communicated to, it becomes a lot more simple. So I want to see how it works before we sign. Great, let me show you how simple it is, and I can clear up any questions you have. They totally will open up to you, and they will internally feel on a very deep level that you really understand them. So there's still one more component to all of this. In fact, according to a study at UCLA, the words that we use are actually only accounting for 7% of the communication. 38% is the voice quality, voice tone, rhythm, pitch, and the other 55% is body language, facial expressions. And because this presentation is actually done virtually and I don't have the ability to show you any of the body language features, let's use the 38% of voice quality and leverage that as much as possible. So specifically, we're going to talk about rhythm, tone, and tempo, and how each of these is different for the kinesthetic, the auditory, and the visual, right? Because each one of these, not only is it wired to a different part of the brain, but because it's wired to a different part of the brain, each type of person processes information at a different rate. It doesn't mean that they're any less intelligent. It just means that the strategy that they use internally may take longer to process. So if we start with the kinesthetics usually need time to interpret the feelings that they get and then put them into words. And this can consume time, and this is why it just takes a little more time for them. When it comes to an auditory person can process information as fast as they can hear. So they're able to process information a lot faster. However, when you think about the way a visual person is processing information, just like this picture, for example, the old saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. A visual can make a picture of something like this, which is a Dali painting, and then they can talk about it in great detail. And because they see it, there's a lot of things that they can describe. The problem is that they can speak incredibly quickly because their ideas are so vivid and so in front of them, and they're so detailed that they can talk about them really, really quickly. The problem is this, that earlier I mentioned that we use all of these some of the time, right? What happens when a customer comes to you that is a kinesthetic and you are more of an auditory or visual person, and you start communicating with them and you start saying things really, really quickly? What they feel like is the train has left the platform and they're waiting, trying to figure out what just happened. Because it's taking time for them. They're totally shocked by the rate and speed of what's going on. So what you really need to do is you need to meet your customers where they're at. If they happen to be a kinesthetic and you happen to find out that they're speaking to you in a more slow tone, slow tempo, I should say, then respond to them, at least initially, respond to them in a slower manner. If it's the other way around, if you're somewhere from the Midwest and you're used to doing things in a more kinesthetic manner, taking your time, enjoying the moment, and you're talking to a New Yorker who doesn't have any time and very visual into the moment, and they're rushing through things really quickly, there's a total disconnect. So you may may need to start saying things faster, or you may need to slow it down, only long enough until you start to gain that rapport with the client, and then you can bring them into whatever modality that you feel more comfortable with. So those are some of the more powerful yet subtle ideas that have helped me a tremendous amount in my, both in my selling career as well as in just generally influencing other people in relationships as well as in coaching and other things. So my challenge to you is try this out. Don't take my word for it. Try it out. See what it's like to communicate with somebody who's a visual in a visual language, and then switch it up and communicate to them in a kinesthetic language, and see what kind of response you're going to get. Try saying things to them exactly as they said them back to you, or try saying things differently. Try saying paraphrase. See which one gets you to the deal quicker. So that was my presentation. If there's any questions right now, or if you have any questions, if you had any questions so far, I'd be happy to answer them. Just type them in. If you haven't already, and Melissa, do you have any questions so far?
No, I don't think so. Nobody's posted any questions yet, but if everyone wants to take the opportunity now, if you have any questions, whether it's about the presentation or the platform, we welcome them right now.
Yeah, and while you do that, I do want to let you know that you're all going to get a copy of the visual components of this presentation. You're going to receive an email shortly after the presentation with it.
Oh, we have one question there, Jean. For those of you who haven't opened up your meeting chat, if you go to the left-hand side of your screen, above all the profile pictures, you'll see View Room Chat, and that'll pop out a window. So if you'd like to participate and ask a question, we have Sean B. here who just asked, do you take time at the beginning of a sales pitch to see what type each person is?
Absolutely. It's one of the biggest mistakes that I think people make in both sales and in communicating, especially in sales, is that people are so focused on pitching and they don't yet know how the person needs to be pitched. So the beginning of the sale, you first need to make sure that you actually pay attention to what the behavior of your client is, or your customer, how they're acting, what they're saying, how fast or slow they're saying it, what are the words they're using, and then ask those important questions. What's important to you? Why is that important? Take some time, especially the first third of the sales process should be spent inquiring more about the specific way that your customer is used to buying. And once you have that, the actual pitch itself can be very, very short because it's tailored specifically to what they're looking to hear, see, or feel.
Okay, Jane, we have a couple other questions coming through. One was, should we actually prepare different pitches based on the 3 different types of people that we encounter, so you could then communicate effectively with the customer?
It certainly couldn't hurt as an exercise. I would definitely prepare all 3, just so you're comfortable with it, especially if it's not a modality that you're used to selling in. And then the other thing is, of course, listen to what again, how they're saying the words that they're saying, and what are the actual words that they're saying, and then feed that back to them. But as an exercise, it's an excellent thing to try to come up with 3 different pitches, and that way you're going to be a lot more targeted, and you're going to get a lot more sales that you normally wouldn't have.
Okay, great. We have another question here. What are some of the ways to discover what type of communicator they are if they don't offer keywords like "I see what you're saying"? Do you have any tricks or tips?
Yeah, they usually will communicate that to you. The issue that it's a very valid concern for somebody who's not used to listening for these things and not used to hearing hearing them. So I can see how you could interpret that to be a problem. However, if you ever bought a car, for example, or you're looking to buy a car, and perhaps it was a car that you've never looked at before, and you never thought that you noticed it, and then you go and buy it, or you're preparing to buy it, and then all of a sudden you notice that it's like on every corner, everybody has one. It's the same kind of effect. Once you set your intentions on listening for this and watching for it, the opportunities will present themselves. The other way, of course, is listen to the speed and the rate at which you're talking to. If it's somebody who takes the time to kind of check in with themselves, and you'll actually see, when you start looking for it, you'll actually see the person take some time to collect their thoughts internally if they're kinesthetic, and then say it to you in a slow manner. As well as if you're communicating with somebody who speaks super quickly, you can tell that chances are this person's speaking from a visual point of view.
So we have, the next question was, what do you consider the best way to program yourself to these different language patterns? But it sounds like you're simply saying just be consciously aware of listening and picking up on these things that you've mentioned in the presentation, correct?
Correct. So, and this is coming from somebody who spent a lot of time studying and as well as teaching language patterns. If you are familiar with hypnosis as well as neuro-linguistic programming, there's a big emphasis on language patterns. And I find the stuff that I taught today to be a lot more powerful because it circumvents a lot of what you need to do in terms of learning the language patterns. All of the patterns are supposed to be designed to help you communicate with that deeper part of them. Well, they're already telling you and showing you what needs to be done. The problem is most of us haven't been taught to pay attention to it. And it's something, it's a process called pacing and leading, where you first have to match the behavior of your customer before you can then get their trust or get into that rapport and then lead them to something else. And rapport is really the key here. In fact, next week, a good friend of mine and a sales guru is coming on to talk about rapport in the next class. So definitely be sure to check that out in the next week's online class. Do you have any other questions?
No, I think basically people are asking what types of preparation, but it sounds like this is something that takes a little practice and you're doing once you speak to someone, because the next question was, what types of preparation can we do before we walk in the door to customize our pitch to that customer? Obviously, we can't talk to other competitors who could probably tell us this before we walk in the room.
So to understand the question right, is it the kind of the preparation you're doing for yourself, or preparation doing in terms of what kind of how you're going to be communicating with this particular customer?
Yeah, I think people are wondering, what can you do in advance?
What to do in advance? The only thing to do in advance is to make sure that you yourself are in the kind of state emotionally that you want your customer to be in, because emotions are contagious, right? So you want to have the kind of emotions that you want your customer to have about the product, right? If you ever notice that the salespeople that are most excited and passionate about their product are much better at selling it, even though they may make tons and tons of other technical errors. It doesn't matter because they're so enthusiastic, and that enthusiasm is contagious. So your business preparation should be in getting yourself excited for the product, because if you're not going to be excited, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to get them into that state, even if you get, even to get them to open up to you and to tell you what's important for them and all that. It's a lot. I'm sure you will all agree that if you've ever dealt with somebody who's really passionate and excited about what they do, even if perhaps it's not a product you're necessarily interested in, or maybe it's a cold call that you didn't initially want to take. The person on the other line just sounded so enthusiastic and excited that you kind of said, all right, I'll listen to what you have to say. And so that's the biggest thing that I would focus on preparing.
And do you have...
The rest of the customer will tell you once you have...
do you have any examples or kinds of questions that you could ask to see if they are kinesthetic, auditory, or visual?
Examples of questions to see if they're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic. I would just say that ask them the simple questions that you would normally ask when you are qualifying your customers. Ask them what's important to you about the service that you're selling. I think that's probably the most important question you can ask. And depending on what words they use, you will know. And again, depending on how quickly they speak, you will also be able to pick up on that.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any other questions before we wrap this up? We did say it was 3 to 3:30, and we're just about 7 minutes over. So if anyone has any other questions, we'll take one last one before we let you on your way. And I also would just like to let everyone know that after this, we will be sending out the presentation, and we will also be posting a recording of this online class on our website, Sales School, which will give you information in the follow-up email. I think we have another question here.
And if you haven't already tried Crunch Connect, I definitely encourage you to try it. We just recently launched a company feature that allows you to share all of the really cool collateral, as well as some of the really good presentations that you had and recordings that you had with the rest of the people in your company. So I definitely encourage you to check it out. And if you want to find out more about the product, more about the platform, or even get a quick training on it, we'd be happy to help you out with that. You can contact me at gene@salescrunch.com. And I would be happy to... I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Gene, we have one last question here. How can you use these methods to get through to a prospect who has a general distaste for being pitched? And lastly, are there any books that you recommend to help with this process? Gene?
Okay, so can you repeat the question one more time?
Sure, it's right up in the chat window. How can you use these methods to get through to a prospect who has a general distaste for being pitched? Do you have any tips in a situation like that? And then just...
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Be creative, be unpredictable. In terms of books, there are lots of really cool books. Persuasion Engineering by Richard Bandler and John Lavelle. Again, that's Persuasion Engineering, Richard Bandler and John Lavelle. There are tons of NLP books out there that deal with this as well. I can't think of any off the top of my head, but if you're really interested, follow up with me and I'll be able to refer you to more books. In terms of getting to somebody who doesn't like to be pitched, you got to do something unpredictable. You got to do something. One example that I have with a former colleague of mine, they were calling on this particular developer for months and they got nowhere. And then at one point, one of them said, "I'm just going to send them a big basket of flowers." And they did. They spent like $120 to send them these flowers, and they got called back the next day. So do something that is, if it's an important one, if it's a really important person and you think you absolutely have to get in touch with them, then you got to do something creative. If it's just a prospect that's being difficult, maybe this is just not something that's important to them right now, and maybe they're just not the kind of person you want to deal with. I mean, there's nothing wrong to say. There's plenty of customers out there, and if you're spending too much energy or time on a certain customer, then you're probably not going to enjoy working with them.
Great. I think that wraps up the questions. So I guess we can. It says people can sell to them.
Everybody, well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to share this information with you. As I hope that you found this information to be useful, and hopefully you can go out there and actually try it for yourself and see just how well it works. And be sure to check out some of the future classes that are coming up. Like I said, there's one on the 4, which is excellent. And with that, I'll let you get back to the rest of your day and then enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jean.
Sales Crunch. Learn more, earn more.